Novaris had many faces. The royal district answered to the crown. The harbor belonged to merchants. And the great towers belonged to corporations. But Bairro Sol belonged to families, to children, and to dreams that had not yet learned how small the world expected them to be. My family understood about me. I hated mornings, unless football was involved. My mother usually called me once. Kairo. I heard her. I just decided that answering was unnecessary. Then she called a second time. Kairo, wake up. I heard that one too. But the third call sounded less like parenting and more like the beginning of a military operation. Kairo. I jumped out of bed and shouted, I'm up. That wasn't completely true. I was actually on the floor, but at least I was awake. Every morning, the smell of breakfast reached me before I was fully conscious. I could forget my school books. I could forget where I had left my shoes. But somehow, I never forgot where the food was. I reached the table, sat down, and immediately started eating. My mother stared at me. Good morning to you too. My father laughed. At least a boy has priorities. Still chewing, I told him. I said good morning. My mother raised one eyebrow. When? I swallowed. In my head. My father laughed again. My mother did not. Every child knows that look from their mother. The look that tells you your next sentence could decide whether breakfast remains peaceful. My father was naturally athletic. Broad shoulders, strong arms, and the kind of body that looked trained even when he wasn't training. At the time, I never imagined that I had inherited more from him than his appetite and stubbornness. Around my neck rested an old medallion. My grandmother had given it to me as a family heirloom. I still remember the evening she placed it in my hand. Train wings. Before fastening it around my neck, my grandmother looked into my eyes. Keep this close to you, Kairo. I asked, what does it mean? She smiled. One day, you'll understand. To me, it was only a gift from someone I loved. I didn't know that its symbol was older than the Kingdom of Khamora itself. After breakfast, I made my way through the streets of Bairro Sol. Every street had its own story. There were neighbors who knew everybody's business, shopkeepers who could hear trouble from the other side of the road, and children who could turn almost anything into a football goal. 2 stones, a doorway, a wall with 2 chalk marks. It didn't matter. We always found somewhere to play. Football was more than entertainment in Novaris. It crossed districts, social classes, and generations. It was a language spoken throughout Khamora. And somehow, I understood that language better than most people realized. When I approached the field, Orion called out, Kairo, are you playing or watching? I was waiting for you to ask. Neres laughed. He was waiting for breakfast to settle. I looked at him. Keep talking. Before we could start arguing, Talon interrupted us. Teams first, arguments later. That was my circle. Orion was always moving and always challenging someone. Neres could turn almost anything into a joke. Talon didn't speak often, but when he did, everyone listened, and Mireia noticed things the rest of us missed. Years later, people would call us the first circle, but never enjoyed choosing teams. Before anybody called a name, I already knew where I stood. Not first, not second, sometimes last. I was heavier than the other children, and most of them saw my size before they saw anything else. To them, being big meant being slow, clumsy, a problem they didn't want on their team. One by one, the other children were chosen. Orion joined one side. Talon joined the other. Neres followed soon after. Eventually, I was the only one left. One of the captains pointed toward the goal. Kairo, you're in goal. Again, another child laughed. You don't have to run there. Orion looked at me. Ignore him. I acted like it didn't matter. I wasn't listening. But I was listening. I always listened. I just didn't want them to know how much their words bothered me. They didn't place me in goal because they trusted me. They placed me there because they thought it was where I could cause the least damage. At least, that was what they believed. I stood between 2 improvised goalposts. My knees were stiff. My hands were uncertain. And the player facing me had no intention of making my first attempt easy. Someone shouted, "Shoot!" I watched his foot strike the ball. But seeing something and being ready for it are 2 completely different things. The ball came toward me faster than I expected. Orion shouted my name. Kairo. The ball struck my arms and sent me backward into the dirt. For a second, I couldn't tell what hurt more, my body or my pride. Then I looked toward the goal. The ball had stayed out, still lie on the ground. I said, "I stopped it." Neres shouted, "That still counts." He wasn't wrong. It wasn't beautiful. It probably wasn't even a good save, but it counted. More importantly, it taught my body something. Most children learn through repetition. I learned through impact. The first shot surprised me. The second taught me where to stand. When the next player approached, I watched his feet. I noticed how he planted one foot before striking the ball with the other. I didn't understand why I was studying him so closely. I only knew that I didn't want to be hit the same way twice. When the shot came, I adjusted my position. I still failed to catch it cleanly, but this time, it didn't knock me down. By the third attempt, I was watching their hips, their shoulders, and their breathing. Patterns that should have taken weeks to recognize were forming inside my mind within minutes. As another player prepared to shoot, Orion shouted, "Left, Kairo!" But I was already moving. I pushed away from the ground before the ball had completely left the player's foot. My hands reached the right place before I understood why. I stopped the ball. For a moment, everyone became silent. Orion stared at me. "How did you know?" I didn't. Then Maria asked, "Why did you move?" I looked back toward the player. It just felt wrong to stay there. That was the truth. I didn't see the future. I didn't hear a mysterious voice telling me where the ball would go. My body simply understood something before my mind did. Back then, I called it instinct. Years later, I discovered that instinct was only the beginning. Every impact gave my body information. Every mistake produced a correction. Every failure created a response. Deep inside my cells, something ancient was learning alongside me. Silently, patiently, without my knowledge, and without my permission. Then I saved another shot. And another. The same children who had laughed when I entered the goal began shouting whenever the ball came toward me. But they were no longer laughing at me. They were depending on me. For the first time, they were not looking at the chubby boy who had been chosen last. They were looking at their goalkeeper, their teammate. When the match ended, the captain approached me and offered his hand. "Good saves." I accepted it. "You sound surprised." He looked at me for a moment. "I am." Orion called out, "Come on, keeper." Neres laughed. "He's never leaving the goal now." That was not the agreement. It was a small moment. There was no trophy, no crowd, no royal stadium, just a dusty field and a group of children who had finally seen something useful in me. But when you spend enough time feeling invisible, being seen can feel like winning a championship. That night, I climbed onto the rooftop above our apartment. From there, I could see the lights of Novaris harbor. Cargo ships moved across the dark water toward kingdoms I had only heard about in school. I wondered where they were going. I wondered what existed beyond Nyara. And I wondered whether I would ever leave Bairro Sol long enough to see it for myself. I believed the match had changed how the other children saw me. What I didn't understand was that something inside me had changed too. I touched the medallion around my neck. For a moment, I thought I felt it move, not because of the wind, not because of my breathing. Something else. Something I couldn't explain. Then my mother's voice came from below. "Kairo, time for bed." "Coming." I ignored the feeling and went downstairs. I was still a child. Football mattered more to me than ancient symbols. I didn't know that someone had once tried to erase that symbol from history. I didn't know that the same mark existed somewhere beyond Novaris, hidden behind locked doors. And I definitely didn't know what had begun awakening inside my body. History rarely announces itself before it arrives. Sometimes it begins during a storm. And sometimes it begins with a boy nobody chose. My name is Kairo Azevar. And this is the story of how I became Gen Zero. But this was only the first sign of what was awakening inside me. What do you think happened during those saves? Was it instinct or something far beyond human? Tell me your theory in the comments. And if you want to continue my story, subscribe and join the First Circle. Episode 3 is coming next.